Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And tonight we have with us Dr. Betty Martini, and we're going to be talking about aspartame. Amen, sister. Thank you, Lord. I love the Lord so much, Dr. Betty.
So do I. So do I. Jehovah God. Yes.
Oh, we got to be thankful. We might be going through a lot down here on this planet, but you know what? We wouldn't be able to get through any of it if we didn't have him.
Amen. Absolutely.
And just before we started the show, we were talking about all the crazy stuff that's going on, and you were saying that your webpage was hacked and that you have been coming under attack. It seems like all of us whistleblowers they're amping it up on us, Dr. Betty. Why don't you tell us what's going on?
Well, they're just, every time they do a new study on aspartame independently, it shows all the cancers and all the different things that it causes, and they are getting so exposed. And the biggest website on aspartame was doorway.com with one O in the door, DORWAY.com, and it stands for David Oliver Reitz, who lost his life to aspartame and his daughter promised him when he died that it would always remain. And back then when he started it, we had to type in all the government things. It wasn't like today you can scan them all in. But they were constantly hacking it. And finally they hacked it down recently, and his daughter sent me the whole website and so that I would have all the information. But then she said that there are some other people that will be putting it back. But everything that you do, they're constantly on our website, which is mpwhi.com, stands for Mission Possible World Health International. And today I got an email from somebody in Sweden wanting to know about the peer-reviewed research. And he couldn't figure out why something on the flu in Romania was listed under an aspartame study, and the study evidently, was, just so strong that they didn't want people to see it. So they replaced it. This was just this morning. But one of the articles I wrote recently, all these Diet Coke or Diet Pepsi spokesmen all get aspartame disease, not, unless we warn them in time. But, like Michael Fox got lupus, and that was Diet Pepsi, and Cher, who we sent a letter to, and she stopped advertising it as chronic fatigue syndrome, and Selena Gomez, who's an advertiser for Coke. Michael Fox got Parkinson's from it, and Selena Gomez advertises it. Now she has lupus. So I wrote an article about it, and then I attached to it, because the article that I'd written to the CDC was on Doorway, and I had a copy of it, and so I added it to it because it's probably the strongest article that I have ever written on aspartame. When CDC said that there was panic on the issue, I said, well, panic's a lot better than death. But in this article, I explained how aspartame causes lupus, triggers it. And it's from the formaldehyde, turns the body against itself. And it went into such detail. I added it. Well, then I tried to send it to somebody, and it says, and they had hacked it off my website. So I thought, well, I'll go to another website that posted it. And when you clicked on it, it would send you back to the original website. So this has been just a constant thing about their hacking. It shows that they're being hurt when almost 100% of independent scientific peer-reviewed research shows all the things. You know, the last one shows that it raises fasting blood sugar, one on strokes and myocardial infarctions or heart attacks. Actually, aspartame causes sudden cardiac death. All these very terrible things that are triggered or precipitated by aspartame come out in all this peer-reviewed research. And so they just constantly keep hacking. And, for instance, you know, I've worked with Proposition 65, and they were deciding on it being whether it is a carcinogen. And, of course, that was admitted by the FDA themselves, Dr. Adrian Gross, to the Senate on August 1st, 1985. He said it violates the Delaney Amendment because it caused brain cancer. It caused a lot more than that. But he said, therefore, you could not even add an allowable intake because it causes cancer. And his last words were, and if the FDA violates its own laws, then who's there to protect the people? And that's the reason Mission Possible exists. But anyway, this in California, you could only speak 5 minutes. But I went out there because I knew the flax would be there, like the front group, Calorie Control, and Dr. Adamson, the only one I know is, used to be the National Soft Drink Association that protested against aspartame, and now it's American Beverage. But I took all the medical texts out there. I don't know how I managed to do this in 5 minutes, but it changed the vote. I actually showed them a book where a woman got so sick of the propaganda that she decided that she would do a study herself. And the tumors were so large on aspartame that the rats were using them as pillows. And I showed the committee that, and Dr. Roberts' medical text, and also Dr. Monty's While Science Sleeps, a Sweetener Kills, and how the FDA made a deal with G.D. Searle not to seal the teratology of birth defect studies, and that showed neural tube defects and spina bifida and cleft palate. And so then that's when we got these studies. This is when Dr. Monty wrote the book. The last chapter on aspartame and autism, which is spread throughout the world because of it, you can read free by going to www.whilesciencesleeps.com. But I showed them all these different things. And then when it got to the European Food Safety Authority, they started out by saying something against the study. And I said, actually, it was so prestigious that Dr. Safridi actually got a reward for it, and that the head of EFSA resigned and said they were pressured by industry to hijack science. So when the board heard that, and I said I could hardly carry the medical text, which is 1,000 pages of
I've
diseases.
seen that book, Dr. Betty. You're such a tiny woman. I can't believe you lifted that book up.
Oh, I know. I mean, it was difficult. In fact, I took my husband along with me so we could carry all this stuff. But actually, I took an article I wrote, which is one of the most damning, that was published by the National Health Federation and Freedom News, Rock Gut Aspartame Methanol Mania, and it talks about Proposition 65. And then I took the mechanism out of Dr. Roberts' medical text on how it does cause cancer, and gave it out to the committee because I only had 5 minutes. And sure enough, it changed the vote, and the National Health Federation put it on the front page, and it's called drink and be murdered. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's on rents.com too. You can pick it up. So
you
they
think
are
when
going to do
Selena
something about it.
Gomez started doing the commercials for them, they gave her a lifetime of free pop?
I think they give it to all the politicians, and because if you remember, I actually went to New Mexico and testified before Congress there to try to ban it, and almost the whole committee was sitting there, knowing this meeting is on aspartame, sipping a Diet Coke, and Dr. Ken Stoller, who testified with me, got up and he said, "How are we going to get anything done with you all sitting there drinking Diet Coke?" And he said, at least have mercy on the children. And, of course, they didn't. One of them, I was able to get off of aspartame, who was diabetic, and showed her so much proof. She said she would get off of it, but she didn't try to ban aspartame. So, this is terrible. Interesting thing, when I was in California, I was met at the door because they were having some kind of health forum there. They wanted to know who I was, and I said, "Where are you from?" Because he had a sort of an accent. He said, "I'm from Romania." When I told him what I was doing, he said aspartame was banned in Romania 6 years ago because it caused so much cancer. And that's how I ended my 5 minutes, that it's causing cancer throughout the world. There's no way. There's absolutely no way to deny it, and it does violate the Delaney Amendment, which says you cannot put something in food that causes aspartame. The worst thing that is happening now, and I think you saw an article that I wrote, something about Pfizer and Caesar's Dilantin, that Pfizer actually was putting aspartame in Dilantin, and you were very interested in that subject. And so I looked up an article because it's long and goes into great depth. The man did not want to lose his job, and he said he had called the Pacific Epilepsy Society. Let me see which one it was. It was Dr. Glenn Mapson. He said, "I don't want to lose my job," but they've changed Dilantin. You'll see that it looks different, and that it now contains aspartame. It was interesting that there were articles about the new Dilantin having aspartame and all the reactions people were having. And one lady says, "I know they're going to get this off the internet." And so I made a copy of every single comment. But the best article that you can read by Dr. Glenn Mapson, it's spelled Mabson, but anybody that has a seizure problem, the whole issue is in this article that you can Google called "Epilepsy Study Incriminates Aspartame and Medications." And everybody should print that out because so many people are having seizures, and aspartame, of course, is a seizure-triggering drug that interacts with all anti-seizure medication, and now they're putting it in the anti-seizure medication. And
they
this
are
is
so evil.
So evil.
Dr. Betty, a lot of people, they just think aspartame's only in pop. They don't realize that they're sneaking it into everything. The medication, even the children's chewable vitamins.
Absolutely. And they actually almost killed me with it. Now, this is very, very interesting because, here I was in the hospital, but I was educating the doctors, and I've done that in 4 different hospitals, and they were so grateful and thankful for the information, and I gave out reprints of that rock good aspartame. And but my problem was gastrointestinal, and people have to understand that because of insurance, that if they prescribe for you like they did for me Reglan and Zofran, and they said, there's no aspartame in it. So when it was given by the brand name, I didn't have the problem, but because of insurance, they filled the generic name. And so I didn't know I was taking it, didn't see it on any label. And finally, I recommend that everybody who ever walks into a hospital puts on the list of your allergies aspartame and the different by different names like neotame and equal, so that they get all the different products. And so doing that, I complained to the hospital when I found out what it had caused me, and one of the doctors said, "I'll be right back." And didn't come back for an hour, and he said, "Betty, I want to apologize to you, but we cannot help you." He said, "I went through every single gastrointestinal drug on the market generically, and they all have aspartame."
Wow.
So, and let me tell you what, when I went in pain, and they gave me something for pain, on 3 occasions I stopped breathing. And you know what? You hear all this stuff about opiates and people overdosing. It interacts violently with aspartame. Like when they gave it to me in the emergency room, I broke out with urticaria or hives from my head to my toe. The doctor thought it was the pain medication, but it was the aspartame. And that's when I stopped breathing. And all this stuff is in the news, and people don't really know what is going on. And I was so upset about what they were doing to people that I typed in the entire chapter of aspartame and drug interference in Dr. Roberts' medical text, Aspartame Disease and Ignored Epidemic. And if you look on my website under drug interference, you just click on it, it will have the whole chapter of the mechanism by which it causes every single different drug. And that's how immediately you knew Michael Fox, when he had Parkinson's, was flinging his arms out. So that's what happens when you use aspartame and the drug that they use for that. And we wrote Michael Fox and told him MAO inhibitors. But, in fact, a new book is out where you can read all about it, called Aspartame, King of Toxins, by Ray Parker Birch. And what I would do, every single person, if they get any drug, that they should print out one of the 2 articles. One, iatrogenesis, which is the meaning of it is you go to the doctor to get well, and you become disabled instead. But it talks about the scopes and aspartame, and it has all that information from Dr. Roberts on the different drugs and the mechanism by which it interacts. And everybody should give a copy of that if they go in the hospital and to their physicians, so they know about it. Like doctors prescribed, something like Coumadin, and if they're on aspartame, it won't, it will interact and not work. And a lot of people have died of hemorrhage, and you've seen all these articles about it. But doctors have no idea, and as one doctor told me, he says, this ties our hands. When we write for a prescription that we know, for instance, like Zofran for nausea, we have no idea that the generic is going to have aspartame in it. And so this is, for instance, I know you've seen the movie Sweet Misery of Poison World, and one of the last interviews is a lady that was going in for an operation on, had to do with joints. And I said, oh, please don't do that. it interacts with aspartame, actually interacts with the operation. And so I asked Dr. Bowen to write something about it and explain about this interaction, and also Dr. Hauser to write about aspartame and fibromyalgia. Sent all this for her to give her doctor because I couldn't change her mind. But not only did she put down in the hospital that she was allergic to aspartame, but she told everybody, and somebody gave her some lemonade, and it had aspartame in it, and she became a cold blue, and they had to resuscitate her to save her life. Well, in this case, she survived, so she could tell people that it was the aspartame. But all these people are dying from drug interaction, and many times they think it's some drug they give them, but it's because they are on aspartame. And there are already class actions on Reglan and Zofran, because Zofran is something that you use for nausea. So all of a sudden doctors begin to prescribe it to pregnant women, and their children were born with birth defects like autism. So there's a class action on it. Same thing with Reglan.
Yeah, Dr. Betty, tell us the story of this young lady that you sent me the email about. Selena Gomez was her name?
Selena Gomez, yes, and she's got lupus, and she doesn't know it. I tell you something interesting. I just happened to be looking at the Enquirer 2 days ago, and it was something else about her and pregnancy. Now, I didn't read the whole article at the time, so I don't know whether she's still pregnant, but she wasn't using birth control drugs because they were giving her such a bad time. Well, she's drinking aspartame, and so it interacts with hormones. So she didn't take it, and this is what happens, and it's a good thing to know. Is number one, aspartame, while you're on it, you usually can't get pregnant because it's an endocrine disrupting drug, stimulates prolactin, changes the menses, and causes infertility. Okay, well, if you get off of it and get pregnant, it's an abortifacient. So many people lose their babies before they know, that they're pregnant. And if the baby survives, it's a teratogen and causes birth defects. So, and she was talking about the fact that the problem with the birth control products, not knowing all of this. And so she's got lupus, just like Michael Jackson, and now it talks about the problem of her getting pregnant when she didn't want to, but she doesn't know it's from the aspartame. And in Dr. Roberts' information, it says even if you get off of it, you can still react with other drugs because of the chemical hypersensitization.
Now, you had sent me another email, Dr. Betty, with a story of a young lady that had written to you, and her first two children had birth defects because she was drinking Diet Pop while she was pregnant, and then she was having problems with her third pregnancy when she contacted you. Tell us about this young lady.
Well, she wasn't using aspartame to begin with, but she got pregnant, and she thought it would keep her from gaining too much weight. But aspartame is just the opposite. It's caused an epidemic of obesity. She was trying. In fact, I've written for years to the Federal Trade Commission, and they won't do anything about it. And finally, an organization filed a petition, and they said, we don't have the money and the resources. And I wrote and said, well, this is not only your job, and it's caused a lot of deaths, like a woman who was trying to lose weight, and she kept gaining because she was using aspartame. And she said, well, from now on, I'm only going to eat products or drink products that have aspartame in it, because then I'll just have to lose weight. And she dropped dead with methanol poisoning. And, you know, Diane Fleming is a woman that's been in prison 15 years because her husband died of methanol poisoning. And, of course, it was from the creatine, which has aspartame in it, unlabeled, and the fact that he was an aspartame addict and drank Diet Pop all day. So you can see, you know, the reasoning behind all this. And I believe it's Agenda 21, which tells you that's for depopulation. And I believe that they're using, it's my opinion, to really depopulate, because all the pharmaceutical companies know about aspartame. In this article, which I wish everybody would read, I want to read you one line. The most profound reason for this spectacular increase in seizures is the inclusion of the drug aspartame in with the new larger size anti-seizure drugs, Dilantin, Depakote, Tegretol, and several others produced by major pharmaceutical corporations. So it just a real bad case like this was one from one of the Falkland Islands, and he was Mission Possible Falkland Islands, and his wife got an aspartame brain tumor, and his 18-year-old daughter, since birth, had been using aspartame and having seizures every single day of her life. And, of course, the anti-seizure medication would not work. When he found one of my articles, he got her off, and just immediately his daughter stopped the seizures. And he wrote an article about it, and there's not a lot of people in the Falklands, 3 or 4 million. But he sat down, because he knew how hard it was to get it banned, and wrote every single person in the Falklands, and he told me that aspartame products now rot on shelves, and that was a quicker way of getting people who live there off of it. But what you have to do is unbelievable.
When they diagnose you with diabetes, like say you're in the hospital and you're having problems, and they do a blood test, and they come in and they say, okay, guess what? We found out you're diabetic. The next step is they have a dietitian come in and talk to you. And the first thing they tell you is you got to start drinking Diet Pop and using Equal and blah, blah, blah. Explain what they're doing to these people by telling them that.
You know, that reminds me of the last time I was in the hospital. I was in ICU, and the doctor looked like he weighed 400 pounds, and he was drinking a Diet Coke. And the nurse said that he gives these crazy answers, and I had a Foley catheter, and he didn't know whether or not to prescribe something that stops the burning. And I really got all over him because I tried to show him the medical text, and he refused to look at it. And I said, people that come into ICU are fighting for their lives. And let's say somebody is diabetic, and he sees you here, sitting here, drinking a Diet Coke. You're not going to tell him to get off his Diet Coke because you're the example. And aspartame precipitates diabetes, simulates and aggravates diabetic retinopathy and neuropathy. It destroys the optic nerve. It causes diabetics to go into convulsions, and it even interacts with insulin. And I said, you've forgotten something, doctor, from medical school. First, do no harm. Think of the Hippocratic Oath. And finally, he just left the room. But the people were that were there, you know, some of them were applauding. They were so glad, you know, that he was told, and this is what's happening. And to make everything really bad, let's say you find out and you want to sue the people that put it in a generic drug and knew ahead of time what it would do. Well, now the Supreme Court has said that no longer can you sue on generics. So, the industry must sit up at night and think of every single way that
to create a
that they
loophole.
can, just no matter what you do, if they're not hacking down websites.
Okay, let me ask you. When you went in the hospital, you put down there, don't give me aspartame, I'm allergic to it. So even in the fact that they made the mistake and gave it to you, you can't legally do anything to them?
That's right. And when I was in the emergency room, they were writing another prescription. I said, don't you see this band on my arm? It says allergic to aspartame. And she said, well, Emory says to use Reglan and Zofran. I said, just because Emory says to do that doesn't mean you can knock off the public. And that's what you're doing. And she said that in front of their doctor that wrote another prescription for it. And she says, I know what I know. I said, what you know is nothing. I've been doing this for 27 years. And a good case about the diabetics is that while I was there, a woman was arguing with a physician in the hall. And she said that I brought my husband to the hospital because the problems he's having with diabetes, and now he's having more symptoms and getting worse. Nothing you're doing is working. So when the doctor walked away, I gave her some information, and I said, get him off of aspartame. The interesting thing is that when she read the articles I gave her, she went back to the room, and I heard her say, don't drink that Diet Coke. He evidently was drinking. He said, that's the problem. And when I saw her again, sometime later, I just bumped into her. She said that once he got off of it, that the doctor said he probably didn't have diabetes in the first place, that it was the aspartame that was raising his blood sugar. And so, the hospital was making him worse and didn't know what they were doing on it. Many people don't have diabetes, but like the study shows, it raises your blood sugar. And so those that are, there to solve the problem are the problem. And the dietitians, are people that are funded by industry. So no matter which way you look, that's why we're a volunteer force all over the world, because it needs to be in all different languages. And in France, the lady that's Mission Possible France, Corinne, she just happened to fall in front of a train and didn't live to see that the aspartame industry was sold for €1, $1.12. That's the good work she did by lecturing to thousands of people. And now they've approved Advantame, which could be worse than aspartame because it's half aspartame and half vanillin, which many times is made genetically engineered with aspartame. And there's been a lot of writing about not having long-time studies. They know what they're doing. And so what do? You just save as many as you can.
Telling me that when people were finding out about aspartame, because there was a lot going around on Facebook and that, and then I had interviewed you, and you said that they changed the name to Amino Sweet, and so you warned everybody to anything that says low fat. If it says Amino Sweet, that's aspartame. So I started looking, Dr. Betty, and oh my God, everything. It says Amino Sweet now.
I know, and not only that, I lectured in the medical schools in New Zealand, and in New Zealand, aspartame is listed as 951. Well, if you weren't a researcher on aspartame, how would you know that 951 is aspartame? Someone there took me through the grocery store and picked up even boxes of vitamins that said on the back, 951. Many times you'll see it on toothpaste, for instance, and you wouldn't think to look at the ingredients. Somebody said a very smart thing. The only way to avoid aspartame is to buy products that don't have a label on it. In other words, if you buy an apple, there's not an ingredient label where they can hide it. And I just put out information about some new device that was invented, and it was in Italy and Egypt, and I translated it, and it detects bad things in products. And the last line, it's on Rense.com, RENSE.com, was that they had used it and found aspartame in fruit juice unlabeled and in soda pop unlabeled. So they're putting it, so when you think you're drinking regular pop, you could be drinking aspartame pop.
And so even in regular gum, right, Dr. Betty? I mean, they have the sugarless gum.
Well, Dr. Walton says no matter what gum that you are using, it all has aspartame, whether it's on the label or not. So now, just like sugar people say they're going to make one, they haven't done it yet, that will be free of aspartame. The thing of it is, when people get off of it and get well, they then want to know, what can we use? And so so that's why just like sugar was made, because there wasn't anything. You know, if they get on Splenda or sucralose that was developed by insect researchers, that it's chlorinated sugar basically, and the sulfate potassium that they mix with it cause cancer and leukemia in original studies. Now, I found sucralose listed as an insecticide on a website. When I pointed it out, then they changed it over to sweeteners. But as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's still an insecticide that's used to kill insects and whatnot. It makes the fruit sweet. So there's such a major problem from all aspects that the only way is to check every drug that you use and use whole foods and things that don't have an ingredient label, because they even had it under natural flavors. They usually had MSG also under these artificial flavors. So this is what you're up against, and it's a matter of saving your life. I mean, I've been doing this for 27 years. I can't believe that they poisoned me, and I had done everything right. And even though it's listed under allergies, as Dr. Blaylock has often said, understand it's not allergic but toxic like arsenic and cyanide. You're actually drinking or eating a chemical poison.
Now, Dr. Betty, tell us about what they did with the pop to the soldiers when they had those skids of pop. Explain what happens to the pop when it's sat out there in the desert.
Well, out there in the desert, it's like 117 degrees. Aspartame breaks down at 86 degrees, and your temperature is 98.6. So you can just imagine that you're drinking formaldehyde cocktails. So, you know, this is the problem. And
they knew that, you know, when they put that pop out there in that heat and then let our soldiers drink it, what it was going to do to them.
Yeah, I met somebody from the military, and he was telling me that, I guess it was in Afghanistan, that the soldiers thought they were being poisoned by the water, and they were given little packets to flavor it. What do you think? The packets contained aspartame, and he was with military intelligence, and he said It is not the water. You're putting aspartame in there, and that's why you're getting sick. And why would they give the military these little packets? You know, none of it makes sense except Agenda 21 on depopulation, and it's just, it's sad. What can I say?
You know, Dr. Betty, I'm going to have to get another email out to you because I am doing a series of interviews on with Steve Olson on, it's called Deep State Blues, and I just did a whole hour and a half interview about how the veterans were targeted, and I would like to have you come on and do another interview with me to put up on that webpage because I had a lot of veterans contact me, and I did mention about the POP, but I didn't touch on the aspartame a whole lot. But you know what? I didn't think at all about all the psychiatric drugs that they're on and that the aspartame is in that. So I think it would be good if we schedule another show and I interview you again to put up there next to that interview, and the veterans can get the whole story of what's going on with them.
You know, I was contacted by a nurse from the Veterans Hospital. There was a lot of articles being written at the time about the servicemen getting proper, care. And she had asked me to write to the nurses because they were giving them these terrible sweeteners. And, of course, none of them would listen, and they were not taking care of the veterans themselves. They didn't want to clean up after them. Some of them they didn't feed. And I had her letter, which gave me permission to, her name is Vicki, and nobody would listen. And I'll tell you, my brother was a Green Beret, and he became a Diet Pop addict, actually. And I said, you know, this is what I do, Bob, and you've got to get off of it. And you've already got an irregular heart rhythm, and you'll end up, the next thing you know, you'll have a heart attack, and then you'll have surgery. And that's exactly what happened to him. His wife finally got him off of it. But while he was in the hospital, I happened to be there, and I was just furious because one of the doctors says, we're going to bring a bunch of doctors into the room, try to help your brother. And when they did, it wasn't at all to help him. They wanted him to sign this little pink slip that they wouldn't have to resuscitate him if his heart stopped. And I was just furious, at what they were doing, and we got everything changed. But if I had not been there at the time, he might not be alive today. And it was Dr. Bowen. He was my brother was in the emergency room, and they'd given him morphine, and they had called me, or my other brother had called me. He said he wanted to be buried in Oregon, and I said, well, why are you burying my brother? And then Dr. Bowen, who lives in Oregon, they were telling me of all the reactions he was having, and I said, if you're going to give him morphine, it will just interact with aspartame. You'll be pulling him off the ceiling. So the nurse called me, and she says, I thought it was all a hoax. I said, no, it's the front groups, and this is what's going to happen. And so sure enough, it did. And then Dr. Bowen went over to the emergency room and took away his Diet Coke, and they put a big sign over his bed, no aspartame, because they thought he wouldn't live. And once he got him off the aspartame, all those horrible reactions stopped. So just think, Mary, if I had not been there, he wouldn't be alive today. And this is going on, everywhere.
You saved so many lives, Dr. Betty. I read so many of the emails that you send me where people write you and say that they found out about the aspartame and now they know why they're sick. And, you're just a godsend. You're just a little angel running around with a halo on your head.
Well, we're sort of all a big team, and you're part of it, Mary. If I wasn't on your show, then maybe all these people listening today, might not get off of it. But it's teamwork around the world, and that's the way we've gotten it to this point to get people off.
You should be training all the dietitians, and then they wouldn't be out there forcing this poison on all these diabetics.
Oh, we have written to dietitians for so long. You just can't even imagine what we've gone through. And they passed that dietetic act. I tried to stop it here in Georgia, but the information that I gathered, because it says that you cannot create a monopoly, and so that they get them, once they're a member. Otherwise, they could go to jail for saying that they're a nutritionalist. But I have a whole file on it. And there are some good dietitians, like in the hospital. They thanked me. They said, one of the dietitians told me, she said, after reading your material, I bring my lunch. And they were giving me food with aspartame and family. I said, look, just send me something that doesn't have it in it. And I think I got one little cup of something. I said, where's my lunch? She said it all had aspartame in it. That's why I bring my own lunch, since I found out.
Oh, my goodness. And can you imagine every single person in that hospital, not only with the medication, but even in the food, they're like, here,
that's right.
Here's a dose of poison, and here, top it off with another dose of poison.
I know, and they gave me something, and they were giving me potassium because I was dehydrated and something else. And I said, there's insecticide in this. You can't give me this. And he said, what do you mean? Sure enough, there was sucralose in it. And so, some things I couldn't take. And then they were going to put the potassium. It's such a big pill in the applesauce. And the applesauce had sucralose in it. And I said, well, you can't mash it up in this either. And so they just all had to be educated. But like the dietitian told me, it's not us. It's the big people upstairs, and they have contracts, and they're good friends, and they buy all this crud and serve it to people in the hospital. And of course,
and the sick people make big business for them, don't they?
They do. I just not long was out that they gave me an infection, C. diff, while I was in there, and I came out worse than before I went in. The aspartame caused gastroparesis, where you vomit blood, and it's just a terrible, terrible thing, and you have all these gastrointestinal problems. And I said, here I've been warning people for 27 years, and even they poisoned me. And so you have to, that's how important it is to read every label. Nobody should take a prescription until they either looked in the PDR, the physician's desk reference, or asked their pharmacist to check and see if aspartame's in it. And that's just the way that it has to be, and that's what I've done ever since. And especially since the doctor told me it was in all gastrointestinal drugs. Now, Dr. Roberts had told me some years ago, he said it's absolutely outrageous that aspartame, can cause gastrointestinal problems, and then they give you drugs for that problem with aspartame in it. Now, when he told me that, I did not realize it was every single one that was generic. But that's something for people to think of if they go in the hospital. They have to check the ingredients of any drug because they keep adding it, and more genetic the drugs that are genetic. And I was looking some more about Dilantin that had aspartame in it, and they've got a generic, and it has aspartame in it. And the study originally done by the manufacturer himself was a 52-week oral toxicity study on 7 infant monkeys. 5 had grand mal seizures and 1 died. And they used that as pivotal, as one of their best studies, to get aspartame approved. And if that's the best they've got, where they either had grand mal seizures or died, that's pretty bad. And then it continues to exist. And then in 2009, the FDA, 9 people from the FDA admitted that the FDA was broken, so that they couldn't help you. And one of them got mad and called me because I had a petition to ban, and he said it's not going to happen. And I said, look, I lecture all over the world. People are sick and dying on aspartame everywhere. And he said, so what? We have to depopulate. And that came out of the mouth of the FDA themselves. In fact, there's a new book coming out, and I was asked to write a chapter, and I exposed that, with the FDA. It's
and there,
so
there is so much food out there that is poisonous, and I'm gonna give you a perfect example. And I usually tell my friends, if I see them eating something that's poison, I'll tell them, here's an article, look at this, And my girlfriend had contacted me, and her husband would eat potato chips. Potato chips are very, very poisonous. The oil that they cook potato chips with caused cancer. And I had read this article about how poisonous and toxic potato chips are. And so he went to their other cabin, their other house, and the chips got stale, and she threw them in the garbage. And her dog, she's got a little, like a Chihuahua dog, which is a small dog, got in the garbage and ate those potato chips and almost died. And then she told me she had to take the dog in, and they had it on an IV, and they didn't know if it was going to make it or not. And I said, oh, my God, do you know how poisonous potato chips are? And I sent her the article. Do you know that they actually did a study feeding those potato chips to rats, and it killed them?
Yes, back when Monsanto owned the company, I told them, I said, if you don't want to take aspartame off the market and you're still just looking for profit, just change the label and make it a rat poison, because it sure kills rats and mice.
There you go. There you go. And, and then you wonder, and then people wonder why all these people are coming down with cancer. We're going along with, just because this person has a white coat on and they went to medical school, don't let them take your power back. Know what you're putting in your mouth. When they give you something, research it. Look it up and see what the side effects are. Look and see what's inside of it. Don't just trust. Got to quit trusting everybody.
A lot of people ask why I do this. Well, people have to take a certain amount of responsibility for what they put in their mouth. But in this case, aspartame is not something just not good for you. It is actually a literal chemical poison that'll kill you. And as Dr. Monty wrote in his book, While Science Sleeps, The Sweetener Kills, this formaldehyde embalms living tissue. It turns your tissues to plastic. So you no longer can just go to the grocery store and not look at labels. And there was actually an article about that people are not reading labels and don't even realize that they're getting it. Well, now it's a global epidemic of aspartame disease, and if you don't do that, it's very hard to avoid. And even when I was in Pennsylvania, they did some kind of a study or experiment while I was there, and they told me, you have aspartame in your body. And, of course, I would never knowingly use it, but it's put in things unlabeled, and you don't know that you're getting it, or you're eating in a restaurant.
Right.
Or, even if you're at somebody's house and drinking punch, they could have made it with something with aspartame in it. Now it's a matter of saving your life and the people around you, which is why everybody should get involved. Because
I tried to tell some lady in the store, I saw her buying those Flintstone chewable vitamins, and I told her, I said, I know you think you're making your child healthy, but that has aspartame in it, and it's highly toxic. And you know what she told me? Get away from me. You're a kook. She said the FDA couldn't put it out here and sell it to us if it would harm us.
That's why I never go into a store or anywhere without aspartame information, or I'll take something like the FDA report of 92 symptoms from coma to seizures to death, and that's on our website, and I'll give it out. I'll say, here's the FDA's own admission, or I had reprints of rot gut aspartame made. Now I'm having reprints of the other one where I testified about it being a carcinogen. I always, give them something when I see them buying
you know what I do, Dr. Betty? Because I don't have your information in my hand, I just say, please, just go home and get on the internet and Google Dr. Betty Martini, Sweet Misery, and go to her page and read what she writes about this. And then you'll think twice about giving your child that. And I said, if you even care about your child's life, just do that much for him. And then I
know what? Good idea. And in some cases, to make sure they get off of it, this was funny because it happened recently, that some man was buying all this diet pop, and I said, it causes male sexual dysfunction. And he said as loud as he could, so that's where it came from. I said, well, I wouldn't say it so loud in the grocery store when he put it all back. That's one thing that gets the men off immediately, is when you tell them that. But I do always hand out something, and diet pop is not making a lot of money these days. They're always writing about the losses, and it keeps going down and down and down, their profit, because people are getting off of it. Now Pepsi has even admitted the fact that they took it out because it causes all these health problems, and then because of the lowered sales and people who are addicted to it, they put it back in again. And in fact, you can Google, I guess, Pepsi, you forgot your paper trail, and you'll see that I put in the entire protest of the National Soft Drink Association and said, remember, this is what you did. And then you turned around and lobbied for NutraSweet. So they got to them too. But there's anything you can print off our website on every single subject. Many times I've logged that 1,000-page medical text to the grocery store, and if they have something to say, I show it to them. I said, look how big it is, and it was actually 40% larger, but they said it was too big to print. And then Dr. Roberts, before he died, he said, I need to add 200 pages more because all these new studies are showing such terrible reactions and things that precipitated by aspartame. But unfortunately, he died at the time. But he did give me his 30 years of research, so we have it all. And everything can be proven, as attorneys say, if we just could get them in court. And the problem is they have these bottomless checkbooks, and you need attorneys that are like tobacco attorneys that have millions of dollars, because going against them is like the Third World War. And it's just almost impossible to try to get it off the market. Dr. Monty took it all the way to the Supreme Court. The FDA was ready to take it off the market, and then the judge all of a sudden stopped it. So they get to everybody. It's a really tragic thing.
And are they serving aspartame to the children in the school lunches, Dr. Betty?
Oh, it's worse than that. Today the public, they've told their children, don't use aspartame. So the FDA has allowed 13 dairy products, including chocolate milk. without it being labeled, which is against the law. And so I tell parents, I said, let your children take their lunch to school and give them something to drink so they do not, pick up something like chocolate milk with aspartame in it and they don't know it's in it because it's unlabeled. And we have the report for schools on the website so that parents can email it. It has articles by a lot of the experts. It took it out of a couple of the grammar schools and the middle schools in Chicago when they read it. But I asked all the different doctors to write on how it destroys the brains of our children. And if you remember that Sweet Remedy followed Sweet Misery, where they actually interviewed the ADD people, and they said prior to aspartame being on the market, we hardly even used the term ADD. And all this came with aspartame because it destroys the brains of our children. And now they're giving it to them unlabeled so they won't know. If it says right across the front, aspartame, the child's not going to drink chocolate milk. So they just took it off. They just served it unlabeled. So they have affected all the children. And aspartame is a psycho drug. And that's what's so bad. It interacts with all antidepressants. And every one of the experts I've worked with has said at one time or another that the mental hospitals are just full of nothing but aspartame victims. And then they give them psychiatric drugs which interact in their Diet Coke, and they don't live very long.
And the teachers call the parents in and tell them your child's too restless, so we need to put them on Ritalin, and then they go and take them in the lunchroom and give them the chocolate milk with the aspartame, and then by the time the kid gets out of school, he's a basket case.
I know. It's they're medicated instead of educated, and you have to get to the schools. So what I recommend, and this was written before it took me 8 years to get those studies that show the neural tube defects and all the birth defects. But it's still, we send it to, tell people to send it to the PTA, the Board of Education, the principal, and all the teachers, and tell them not to let their child have any of it. And I don't know if you remember, but you can Google it, Miracle in Wisconsin, and that was sponsored by the ADD people, and they took the worst school in Wisconsin that had the most dropouts and behavioral problems, and they took them off of everything. They took all the vending machines out and brought in natural ovens to give them nothing but food that was healthy. And at the end of the program, there was it was the best school in Wisconsin, and other schools started following what they did. And that shows you why the kids are having so many problems.
What about the program Meals on Wheels, Dr. Betty? Have you ever thought of approaching them and informing them, the dietitians there?
No, there's a lot of letters I still have to write, but it's everywhere. I mean, you have to notify all the pharmacists. You have to notify all the doctors. I mean, it's just there are times when I just go through medical buildings and just leave information with every single doctor. You just constantly are writing to the many organizations. It's a constant job, but of course we have help because we're now in, I think, 45 different countries, and so it's getting all over the world. Even when I was in a small country, when I was traveling, I asked them, did they know about aspartame? And one man says, bad. I said, how'd you know it was bad? He said, I read an article by this woman, and I said, what was her name? He says, I don't remember, but she was a mixed drink. I always thought that was funny. But because my name is Martini, in any event, it is all over the world. I said, I've been called a lot of things, but not a mixed drink. But just as long as it got the information, that's what's necessary. And I always give them information.
I was sitting in a waiting room one day, and this girl was drinking one, and I started telling her about it. And I was telling her all the effects and that it caused. She says, I have to drink it, I'm diabetic, and I started explaining it to her. And there was a man sitting over in the corner reading the newspaper, and when she got up and walked into the doctor's office, he folded his paper up and came over and sat down next to me, and he said, could you tell me where I can find this information on the computer, because I'm diabetic and I've been very ill, and I think this might be the answer to my problem. So I told him how to go to your webpage and that. And then when he walked out of there, because they called him in before me, when he walked past me, he said, thank you so much, sweetheart. I think you just saved my life.
You did. You did. And that's why I tell people to get involved. Some people never save a life all their life, and I make it a habit to at least save a life a day. That's just what you can do just by giving out the information. We make it all available, and we also put aspartame articles as they come out, peer-reviewed studies, and you can just take any of them and make a copy of it like we do rot gut aspartame methanol mania. And I think it may have it in that article where Dr. Alamany told me that aspartame would kill 200 million people. But like I said, those that are there to solve the problem are the problem. And so they're pushing it on the very people they can harm the most. And even when you tell companies like Maltex, on the FDA list of 92 symptoms, headache is number one. And so they go to their doctor, and the doctor puts them on something like Maltex for headache. And what do you think it's got in it? It's got aspartame in it. So then you write the company and tell them they won't do anything. Then they do a study on aspartame and Maltex. And what do you know? It says if you're using Maltex, that it's going to be worse. It makes you worse. They still
What about Ambien, Dr. Betty? Does that have aspartame in it?
Not that I know of. But like I say, you have to always check the generic on it and see what it has in it. You can go right to the computer, and no matter what drug you're taking, like if you were taking Dilantin, put in Dilantin and aspartame, and if it's in it, it'll come up. And you have to check everything. But you can. It's so easy to go to Google. You used to always have to have a physician's desk reference that every doctor has. But now you can. It's so easy on the computer because you can check the generic. And I just saw the generic on Dilantin the day I left town, and I didn't have a chance to follow it up. But every day I go to aspartame and see what's new for the day. Put in aspartame and then put in news and see if there are any new studies. And anybody can do that. You'll get constant information. And what they were talking about was the generic of Dilantin. It had something to do with aspartame. And sometimes I couldn't even find the ingredients, but I didn't have a long time to check. So when people are on certain drugs, they should go to the computer and they should check each and every one, especially by the generic that it was filled by.
So, like, say if they're on Ambien and they give them a generic form of Ambien, then you would write in the generic name and then aspartame, and then in it, and it'll let you know.
Yes, it'll come up with all types of articles and comments and whatever that it has to do that. Try that with Dilantin and aspartame and look at all the articles that you get. But like here, I printed out one the other day, let's see, the 24th, out of Google, the mounting evidence against diet sodas. And when you get one you really like, you can go make 100 copies and keep giving it out. You can save people that you're working with, your church, your organizations that you're part of. And even what I do is you get all these self-addressed envelopes where they pay the postage. I get so much spam, but I always put a flyer in it when they pay the postage on it, and take all these envelopes and send them back to the companies. And in fact, in one case, it was a very large company, and this man told me that they took it out of their lunchroom, and I had sent in a flyer from one of their advertisements, and that's what happened. You never know when you sprinkle seeds what's going to grow.
Now, Dr. Betty, if I was looking on TV one day, and I could have swore, I don't know whether it was Pepsi or Coke, they were saying that they were putting stevia in their pop. What do you got to say about that?
Well, sometimes they use just a tad of stevia, and it's, usually you can tell the stevia taste. But here's what Dr. Blaylock once said about stevia, is that there is the problem that it causes hypoglycemia. But and that's the reason that just like sugar was made. Dr. Blaylock said that it had to be analyzed, and when it was analyzed, it was nothing but organic food, no excitotoxins. And so stevia in its pure form is okay, except for that hypoglycemia that Dr. Blaylock has written about. That's the only problem with it. I just don't trust any of the artificial sweeteners. Usually when you do research, just put in danger before anything, like danger of sulfine potassium or dangers of Splenda, and it'll come up with all kinds of studies and articles by physicians, and you can understand it. I don't tell anybody, at least just like sugar I know about. I know that it is that it's safe, and Dr. Blaylock wrote in the Blaylock Wellness Report, finally a safe sweetener. So that's how I feel about any other product.
Well, my dog's going off out there. Well, we pretty much got to be very careful with everything that we buy then.
You have to read every label. And if you really want to avoid aspartame, it shouldn't have a label. Dr. Fagan once said that if it's in a box, don't buy it. In other words, you want to just use whole food that doesn't have ingredients in it that they can have.
Now, I know a lot of women eat yogurt to try to lose weight, and a lot of it has aspartame in it, doesn't it?
It sure does, and that's what pregnant women like to eat is yogurt. And some of them now say no aspartame on it because they've trying to get people to continue to use yogurt. And I'm sure there is some without it, but not very many. You know, they have taken it out of some of them.
Well, I had read that yogurt's not that hard to make. I mean, you can buy a really cheap yogurt maker and make it yourself, and then you know what's in it.
That's true. Most people are so busy they don't want to do that. They just buy something off the shelf, never look at it, but yogurt is a big offender.
Name a few other things we should be careful of buying.
Well, for instance, there was an ad, and they said, which row has the aspartame? And someone answered all of them. So even in the fine print, it's in so-called healthy cereals, flavored coffee. Be sure on anything baked. You know, that's a good example. If you go in the bakery department of the grocery store and look at the label on some of these things, you know, it may be 10 lines of ingredients. If you can't pronounce them or know what they are, don't put it in your mouth. But anything that says diet, don't buy it.
And when you go to the bakery, like say, a lot of people, they have a diabetic parent, and they're like, well, here, Mom, I bought you these sugarless cookies and this sugarless pie or cake from the bakery. If there's no label on it, then they need to ask the baker what they're using to sweeten with, correct?
Absolutely. And it's I can't believe the amount of ingredients, like something like Nestle's hot chocolate, all the chemicals in that. And so Dr. Caldwell asked the Just Like Sugar people to make a hot chocolate that doesn't have, all the chemicals in it. And it's so interesting, when I first drank it, it really tasted like hot chocolate. I had quit using hot chocolate because it had so many chemicals in it. And this one, made by them, has organic, Just Like Sugar, of course, but the dark chocolate, organic dark chocolate, and pure vanilla, not vanillin, but pure organic vanilla, and that's it. There's nothing else in it. And if the Just Like Sugar people can make it that way, why can't the rest of the world do that? Why do they have to put all these different chemicals in food that make it unhealthy? And take Coca-Cola, their fructose, and Just Like Sugar made a product that they could replace it with that has no side effects and wouldn't cost any more. And I sent a gallon of it to Coca-Cola. They even sent my letter back because they didn't want to have it on file because they're my nemesis. And they said it didn't come through our company. So in other words, why give somebody something healthy if we didn't make it? And they had an opportunity to get rid of that, and they wouldn't take it. So no matter what you do for industry, they know that aspartame is addictive, and they want you to keep doing it. Methanol is classified as a narcotic, and it causes chronic methanol poisoning. This affects the dopamine system of the brain and causes the addiction. And that's why there were Pepsi customers, when they took it out, they were addicted to it, and they wanted it back in. I mean, you got wood alcohol in the thing. So that's what happened with that. And it's got to be taken off the market now with Aspartame. It's going to be so hard to avoid all the different names: Canderel, Benevia, Amino Sweet, 951, Spoonful. So you have to be very, very careful. Or don't use anything. Why do you have to have it? You can put tea bags and a picture of ice or water overnight, and it'll be sweet the next day. Somebody taught me that had these pageants, and that's what they told their girls who wanted to not get anything with sugar in it, is just to do that. There's always a way not to use something, as far as the sweetener is concerned, unless they use Just Like Sugar, which we know is safe. Otherwise, they need to research everything about the product they're using. And if you just put dangers of before any sweetener, it'll bring up on the internet just, all kinds of research that's already been done. It's just a matter of the people taking the time to do it. Make a list of what you want to eat.
Sugar. People say this to me all the time. Well, if I can't use the little blue packet or the pink packet or this and that, what do I use? So Just Like Sugar is one. I know you got more than one. So why don't you tell people what they should be using?
Yeah, you could. There's so many things, like honey. Honey sweetens. Why use chemicals? I really just don't understand it. But it's because of this deceptive advertising that they say sugar-free or diet. And as Dr. Roberts said, when in doubt, throw it out. There's an interesting case of a woman. She thought she couldn't have children. Of course, she was using aspartame, so she couldn't get pregnant, so she adopted. Eventually, she got off of aspartame and gave birth to a child of her own. And she couldn't figure out the reason, and that's why. In fact, I went to Spain to see Mission Possible Spain, and she was very ill. It had really hurt her heart. She was if she had to go anywhere, she had to go in an ambulance. And so she wanted me to see that she could walk now and was okay off of aspartame. And she couldn't work, so I tried to pay the cab driver she sent. I said, I don't want her paying this. Let me pay for it. And he said I would never allow her to pay for it. He says we had one child, and the doctor then told my wife that she was infertile and could never have another one. And Annie said, just get off of aspartame. And she got pregnant and had a son. Believe me, we will never charge Annie for anything. You know, so you see that all the time.
Yeah.
Because people don't know about
Dr. Betty, what about the low-calorie beer?
Well, you know, we've tried to research that for years, and it's not on any label. And one beer company said if it's in it, it would be in the light version of the beer. So if it says, for instance, Budweiser Light, you know, just buy Budweiser. Don't get anything that says light, because they say that if it's in it, it's there. But I've never seen it on the label of any beer at all. And we've really researched that for people who ask. They say
it just occurred to me, because a lot of women drink the light beers.
Yeah, well, they're not helping themselves.
Yep, I imagine it probably is in there, you know. They aren't going to just let you know. But, they, you know, that's a thought, you know. Well, you know, it's always a pleasure to have you come out here and educate us and let us know what's going on with aspartame. And like I said, I'm gonna rebook you if I can, have you come back and you know, do that other show with me on Deep State Blues. I'm going to see if anybody wants to ask any questions. Hello, guest 6. Do you have any questions for Dr. Betty this evening? I know you just came in.
I always do, Badbaby.
Hi, cutie patootie.
Hi, sweetheart. Yeah,
You're familiar with Dr. Betty Martini, aren't you?
I am. So everything she says is just so right on and correct. You know, the thing is, you know, Dr. Betty, I want to ask you this question. All our foods are full of sugar, whether it be, you know, high fructose corn syrup, whether it be those addictive sweeteners, or just sugar in breads, in pizzas, in tomato sauces. It's beyond belief. And people don't realize how that amount of sugar really deteriorates the cranial brain structure. It literally messes with our minds. It's horrific.
I know the Just Like Sugar people have a list, and I probably have it somewhere, of 58 different things that it causes. And recently, I guess about 2 months ago, there was an article in the news on aspartame saying that now neotame is being put in pork. So if you were eating bacon for breakfast, how would you know that there was a sweetener in it? And why should they allow companies to do this without labeling and you not knowing what you're eating? So what you say is true, too, about the sugars, and that's why if you go to rinse.com, you can read about that new device. This is going to be wonderful. That will tell you if something is in a product and it's not labeled, like they found aspartame in a regular soda pop, and they found it in fruit juice unlabeled. And it will also pick up sucrose or sugar if it's in there unlabeled. So I can't wait for them to be available to the public, because it also will pick up, for instance, you can use it on, say, fish, and if it's bad fish, it'll pick it up. But I was glad to finally see a device that would tell you what is undeclared in food. But you can read it on rinse.com, and it's probably by now on our website, MPWHI.
Now, I found out something new tonight, Cutie Patootie, and that is that Dr. Betty, and you weren't here when she was talking about it, said that there's aspartame in a lot of the medications. And I know your parents just had a stroke. I'm just wondering if there was any connection here.
Well, my father had a stroke 4 years ago, okay? And they gave him, now when that stroke happened, I'll break it down for you run by run how it happened. He had the stroke, okay? His right arm wasn't working at the time, and definitely his leg wasn't working. He had fallen when he had the stroke. So we brought him to emergency, and they gave him this, what they called, what they explained to me in layman's as a clot buster, okay? And they said, okay, we're going to give him this. All right. This will, basically save his life as long as he doesn't have any more, clots. If he has a clot and we give him this, it will kill him. So my mother and I made the decision to go ahead and give it to him because he's always eaten very, very healthy his whole life, okay? We gave it to him, and lo and behold, he was fine. I don't know what was in that medicine that they gave him, this clot buster medicine, okay? But he's also, at the time, he's almost 90 now, so it was 4 years ago, so he was 86 when it happened. And I've been doing everything under the sun to try and get his brain and his memory reconnected so he becomes a fully, I don't care if he even walks at this point anymore, Dr. Martini, but to get his mind fully activated again. And this has been the battle that I've been fighting 4 years. And believe me, I've tried many, many things. Right now I'm working on I just started it, on a hydrogen peroxide therapy, which was recommended off this show by Peter, I believe it was, right, Badbaby? And I read through all his information. I found it extremely sound, and I said, I'm working on it. I'm even taking it for myself just to make sure, that I'm healthy and it enhances my thought process and keeps me sound. And I don't know yet. I don't know if it's going to work. We're only on day 9, so we're going to go through the whole series of steps that he recommended. But I just know this, that so much information throughout the decades have been kept from us because, in my opinion, they want to keep us dying. They want to keep us in the system of their lockdown system, entrenched in their pharmaceuticals, their bad foods, and their construct of manipulation. So they basically I don't even know if the word maintain is correct. Controlled probably is a better word, from birth to death. And that's what and I think this is why so many people are waking up to all the information, Dr. Martini, from the medical mafia called the pharmaceutical industry to the food industry called the FDA, to the controlled monetary system of the Federal Reserve controlled manipulated dollar system. It's all one giant construct to keep us in the system of manipulation. I think a lot of people are waking up and breaking free from all this. But one point I want to bring out to you, what's your take on the what is it? The best. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Bisphenol A and B, which is another direct toxin, which they know they're putting into these plastic bottles, which also are affecting us.
Well, I tell people not to use plastic bottles at all if they can help it, to get things in glass bottles. But because you mentioned stroke, my son, and he's young, had 3 strokes. And the thing that is so well known that helps is hyperbaric oxygen. And my son was at a hospital that had a huge stroke department, and they had hyperbaric oxygen, and they wouldn't use it. And I just was flabbergasted, and someone asked one of the doctors, they said, oh, it's used for cosmetic reasons, but not for stroke. And yet I know that in talking with the doctor that if you get somebody who's had a stroke and hyperbaric oxygen in 12 hours, it will reverse it, and even afterwards. But this was the biggest stroke center here, Grady, and they had it in their department and wouldn't use it. Now, Dr. Russell Blaylock, who wrote Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills, wrote a new book on prescription for cures, and when it came to stroke, they did mention hyperbaric oxygen. But, people, the average person doesn't know it, and if the doctors are not educated, they'll never get it. But that's one of the biggest helps that I personally know about, and it was Dr. Ron Lappin that told me that, and he founded this cautery scalpel so people wouldn't bleed, and had this institution for bloodless surgery. And he came here to lecture for me once and went into hyperbaric oxygen. So there are so many things that are helpful, and yet the doctors don't know. When my son had the last one, I brought into a doctor an article off the internet that said that there was something you could give if it was in 3 hours after a stroke.
That was the blockbuster, exactly.
And then I said to the doctor, it's only been an hour, so you can help my son. He says, we know about this, but they wouldn't use it. So that's the problem, is that in the time of an emergency, if you get the wrong doctor, for instance, a good article to read by Dr. Blaylock is Modern Medicine Killed My Brother. You can just Google it. And here, he's a neurosurgeon. They wouldn't let him use to see the chart to begin with, and he only asked one thing, and that was that magnesium be in the IV for any surgery instead of MSG, which is in many IVs. And they refused, and that keeps people like over 50 from having strokes and having heart attacks after anesthesia, and yet they won't do it. So if you read that article, you really see what you're up against. Whenever I go to a hospital, I always give it to the anesthesiologist. But it's a good thing to know.
Well, you're right, Dr. Martini. It's the medical mafia, just like the pharmaceutical mafia. It's like all the decks are stacked against us, and we always seem to come up against the wall. But, in my opinion, like yourself, the real healing technology is always from the ground up. It's got to stay out of the hands of the mafias, which want to control everything. And unfortunately, every time a real breakthrough comes through, they want to buy up the patents or basically shut you down or get you out of the way. So, and then the healing properties, because I've heard you before, the healing properties are natural from this planet. They're all around us. It's just that we've been so dumbed down, by the establishment that people don't know what's up or down or sideways from backwards. And it's unfortunate. And I'm very glad that a large portion of people are waking up, just not enough, because we're still, retained in this system of control. And I can't personally wait for the day where this whole thing falls apart. But I'm very sorry about your son, and I hope he recovered, and I hope he's doing well.
Well, he is doing well now, and I keep telling him and people when they take these deadly statins, you have to take COQ10. But in what you're talking about, you know that they have murdered over 50 alternative medicine doctors.
Absolutely. I'm very well aware of that, doctor. Very well aware.
And the things that they do are just terrible. For instance, I had a formula that I used when I had cancer, and I put it, in fact, the formula in the book, The Only Answer for Cancer, when Dr. Caldwell asked me to write a chapter on it. Well, anyway, the FDA found out where we got the herbs from, this herbalist. And Dr. Roberts had written an article about it, and I didn't know it was coming out, a profile of a super volunteer activist that he wrote about me in Townsend Letters. So anyway, the FDA found out and sent the forestry down and killed all the herbs that this person was growing and had grown his father and his grandfather before him. And when one of the men were dying from the forestry, it's a small town, he came by and said, "Earl, I have to apologize. The FDA made us do it. They said they could not have cancer cured." So you're up against this. And what I did about it is a new book is coming out. And I was asked to write a chapter on it, and I put that in there. Not only that, but then he tried to get herbs to somewhere else, and the FDA absconded with like $140,000 of herbs and fined him $75,000 and had him sign something that he would not tell, and then they expunged the record. Well, I didn't sign anything, and I added it to the book. And this, so which way you go, you're up against industry and the FDA. I call them the fatal drugs allowed folks.
Yeah.
I ought to call them the Food and Death Association. But the thing of it is that all we can do is educate the ones that we can. And I never would have believed I would be doing this now for 27 years because I started, after I was retired. And I'm getting up in years now. But it's because that they have the power and the money, and the only thing that anyone can do is get involved and help spread the word and help educate people.
Well, Dr. Martini, you're right in that same realm as Dr. Hulda Clark and Dr. Bob Beck and so many who have been successful in at least putting out devices and sound nutritional advice. Dr. Gerson's sound medical advice is simply getting rid of cancer by eating organic vegetables and fruits and juicing. I mean, it all falls in line, and you're part of the solution when these monsters, all they want to do is be part of the destruction, because it's all based on a fictitious monetary system created. Again, it all kind of just revolves and circulates around the same thing: power and money and control, and it's disgusting. It makes me sick to my stomach.
I know, with so much cancer, all you have to do is to purify the blood, and cancer dies. It's as simple as that. But you're also up against the people like Walk for a Cure, the little pink ribbons.
Right.
One day I was out. I'd just given a speech on the cure for cancer, and I think we made 4,000 copies. And then I had my cure for cancer and also aspartame in cancer and how it causes breast cancer. And we gave it out free on one of their walk-thons, but they tried to get all of us away. And finally, one of the girls, Michelle, turned around and said, "Wait a minute. This is Walk for a Cure. Do you really want to cure cancer, or are you just here for the money?" And she actually admitted, she said, "We're here for the money, so just get away from us." And that was admitted. That was absolutely admitted. I just get sick whenever I see one of those pink ribbons, and they get all kinds of people to donate, to them. And they are the problem. I always say those there to solve the problem are the problem.
Doc, I got another question for you. With all the chemicals they've been spraying on us now for probably the last, as far as I remember, starting in about 2006 when I woke up, being constantly sprayed with aluminum oxide, barium, sulfur dioxide, what are the contributing factors to all this spraying that they're pouring down upon our foods, our and our soil, which grows, all the vegetation which the animals eat, which we eat, plus the vegetation to eat? What how do you see all this? What's the is it part of the same programming of the dumbing down, destroying basically the human cell
Agenda
structure?
21.
Yeah,
it's Agenda 21, and I did talk to Dr. Russell Blaylock about that, and because he was so upset because these chemtrails, with aluminum, barium, he said, "Betty, you can't go back. In other words, things won't grow, and people will be getting things like Parkinson's and all these type of diseases." And I said, "What do you do?" And he said, "Make sure that every day you take 2 curcumin." And that's what he told me personally to do. And I tell other people, because there's not much you can do. NASA has admitted that they were behind it. I know Dr. Blaylock wondered, who was behind it. But if you go to the government, that's where it is. And then when NASA said that they were the ones doing it, how do you stop them? I actually, some years ago, NASA called me, and I educated. They wanted to know about aspartame, and I gave them all the information, and I don't know that anything was ever done. But
most likely they use that information to use against us, Doc, unfortunately, because NASA's never a straight answer anyway. But do you relate, another question here, do you relate all the spraying of these of the genome engineering they've been doing worldwide to Morgellons and the massive increase in Alzheimer's? Is that directly related?
Naturally, it could be. You've got so many things. But, for instance, an informant told me that the National Soft Drink Association, which is now American Beverage, did a 10-year study and found that aspartame causes Alzheimer's, birth defects, and blindness. And it's very, very interesting that one day I was giving out flyers, and this woman from the National Soft Drink Association said, "Aspartame is safe." And I said, "What about the study you people did that shows that it causes Alzheimer's, birth defects, and blindness?" And she didn't deny it. She looked at me, and she was just shaking. She says, "There's no way you could have those studies." So by telling me that, it showed me that the informant was true. And then during the Olympics here, I met somebody who dated somebody in the Monsanto family, and she asked me, "Why do they tell their friends that aspartame causes Alzheimer's?" I said, "Because it does." And then when I was in St. Louis, I met somebody who told me that attorneys had gone around and talked to doctors that if they told anybody that aspartame caused Alzheimer's, that they were going to sue. And all that, while it is hearsay, I've been hearing it for so long. And, of course, you can understand Alzheimer's, and Dr. Roberts wrote a book about it, Defense Against Alzheimer's Disease, called DAD, and he says aspartame is escalating Alzheimer's, and on the FDA list of 92 symptoms, I think it's something like 9 is memory loss. And people forget to pick up their kids. They don't know where they are. So we have this problem constantly, so you can understand the Alzheimer's. But then you've got genetic engineering, and you've got the chemtrails, and you've got interaction with drugs, and they're doing so many bad things that, this can be caused by several things. But aspartame is one I know causes it.
Well, what about the aluminum oxide in the geoengineering? Because I remember reading a report. This was going back to 2006 when they were geoengineering, spraying all this garbage, and all of a sudden there was an immediate rise in Alzheimer's cases of about 10%. And doctors were shocked, and they were like, "This is not possible. How could this possibly be?" And then, there's been the direct link to aluminum being a major cause of Alzheimer's. So, I put the two links together. The geoengineering, which the main product in that crap that they're spraying on us is, aluminum oxide, which if it's an oxide, of course it's going to penetrate the skin, anything that you're drinking, anything that you're eating, and all of a sudden you have a major spike in Alzheimer's. What's your take on that?
Well, that's what Dr. Blaylock was saying about the chemtrails. It's going to cause all these neurodegenerative diseases. And then they may be using aspartame on top of that. Then you've got genetic engineering. And there's so many things that are on the market, like RBGH and bovine growth hormone.
Right.
And when a mother has a baby that nurses at its breast, the baby needs to double in size, and so and they've genetically engineered the milk that they're drinking, and large cell replication causes cancer. So, just from everything that you see, how are you going to become educated in all these different poisonings? But Alzheimer's just absolutely became epidemic with aspartame.
Yeah.
So it's pretty well.
Badbaby, I'm sorry. I felt like I was taking over, honey. I'm sorry. I just had so many questions to ask.
Oh, that's okay. We're about ready to wrap it up here. We've got about 8 minutes left. So, I want Dr. Betty, because I know your parents are on a lot of medications, and she taught me something new tonight about the medications. About most of them have aspartame in them. So, real quick recap again, Betty, and let my friend here know how to check his parents' medications.
Oh, yes. I was telling Mary about the fact that I was even poisoned on the medications, that a doctor at the hospital told me that all generic gastrointestinal drugs have aspartame in it. So the best thing to do, and I tell everybody this, if you're going in the hospital, for instance, under your list of allergies, put aspartame. That makes the hospital responsible if they're going to give you something with aspartame when, in fact, you've told them that you're allergic to it. And in the movie Sweet Misery, that's what Cheryl Kemper did. And they gave her the bracelet with aspartame allergy in it, and the dietitian gave her some lemonade, and she became a code blue, and they had to resuscitate her to save her life. So before you ever use any medication, get on the computer and put the name of the medication and the generic name and aspartame and see what the ingredients are. And if it has aspartame in it, it'll come up. And so it's in a lot of things unlabeled. But this will safeguard you, because when they gave it to me, I couldn't even walk across the room, and loss of balance is number 2 on the FDA list.
Would that also be in the what is it, the blood control medicine. What is it? The high blood pressure medicine. Is aspartame in that as well?
Well, you'd have to check each individual drug for that. So that just landed me in ICU, not so much because of the aspartame, but when you're in pain, your blood pressure goes up, and they immediately give you blood pressure medication. I said, oh, no, you're going to lower my diastolic, because they didn't tell me till afterwards. And 40 minutes later, I heard them say she's hypotensive, send her to ICU. So, and I told the physician assistant, I said, don't you know when people are in pain, it raises high blood pressure, and aspartame causes hypertension. So it's a big
So if they're on high blood pressure medicine, what she's saying is take the name of the medicine and put it in your Google search engine and put aspartame next to it and enter it, and it'll pull it up. And if they're on the generic form, do it with the generic name and write aspartame next to it, and it'll pull it up, and it'll let you know if aspartame is in that pill.
Got it. I will definitely do that, because, I mean, it's not that my folks are on a lot of blood or a lot of medication. The reality is my mother just takes high blood pressure medication. My father really doesn't take any medication except for all he really takes is vitamins and magnesium to help him, have bowel movements. So they're not on a lot of medication, but, there is such a disruption in my mother's I believe it's her upper GI, and she's been having a lot of problems with that, and we've been trying to figure out what's going on with it, especially with her breathing. It's affecting it tremendously. So I've been trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and it just came to me. I wonder, because she does take that one high blood pressure tablet once a day, and I'm wondering, could that be the cause of the situation?
Well, first thing you need to do is find out if she's on the generic or the regular, and put it in Google and just put N-aspartame and see if it comes up as an ingredient. And also, it will have the side effects and what it causes. Just put in their side effects, and that'll tell you quickly if you put in that. And you may not have been on when I was talking about the fact aspartame people know what they're doing, that now that they've said, the Supreme Court has said you can't sue for generic drugs.
Right.
So it's a big problem there, too. No
now,
matter what they do, they get away with it.
Further advice, Dr. Betty, how would he get in contact with you?
Well, my email is Betty, BETTYM, 19, like 19, at mindspring.com, spelled MINDSPRING.com. I have a southern accent. A lot of people think I'm saying Manspring, but Mindspring, M-I. Betty M19 at mindspring.com, and my website is www.mpwhi.com, and it stands for Mission Possible World Health International. So you can get me there. I'm all over the internet. Even my telephone number is everywhere, so anybody can get to me.
Well, thank you for the advice, Dr. Martini. And, I'm going to look into this because, I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with her. Her, I believe it's, like I said, her lower GI, but it's, she's constant with just, it's like her stomach is full of air and always burping for no reason, and it's a horrible thing because she feels bloated and she feels nauseous, and I don't know what the heck's causing it, but maybe that might be the reason, but I'm going to definitely look into it.
Yeah, well, like she says, it will tell you the side effects. It could be a side effect.
And also, one of the things I said earlier, if you go to my website, look under drug interference, and there is one of the articles I wrote on how aspartame almost killed me. And then there's another one that where I got so upset about it, I typed in the entire chapter from Dr. Roberts' medical text, Aspartame Disease, an Ignored Epidemic, and it goes through how aspartame damages the mitochondria, interacts with drugs and vaccines. In fact, it's an adjuvant as well, but it'll have the mechanism by which it causes this interaction of drugs and a list of them. And the first thing you should do is to print that out and give it to her doctor, because it not only will save her life, but then he will know, for instance, if he's prescribing Coumadin, for instance, it's not going to work if they're on aspartame. It'll go through all the different drugs and help him with his practice and help him with the, management of her.
Right. Well,
and I'll tell you another thing Dr. Betty will do for you. She's done this for other callers that I've had. If you send her a self-addressed envelope with the postage on it, she will mail back the information about aspartame, and you can give that to her doctor so that they are familiar with what it does to you.
Right. Absolutely. I just wanted to say thank you so much, a bad girl, for always allowing me to participate on your show. And Dr. Martini, it's a pleasure speaking with you. A little more enlightenment, a little more knowledge every time. Thank you so much.
Oh, I'm delighted.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dr. Betty. Another great show, and I am going to send you out another email and book you for a recording on the Deep State Blues with Steve Olson. So
okay.
We can hook you up there, and maybe we can help some of those veterans.
Okay. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you. God bless you all, and we're going to call it a night.